Sam Toole, partner here. I've been with the firm for about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in March. Primary started about a decade ago. At the time, early stage investing and seed investing in New York was much smaller. I think there were 4 or 5 firms. And Ben and Brad, the founders of Primary, said, we think New York's going to be the tech hub of the East Coast. We want to build a fund that's focused on investing and supporting this ecosystem. Today, that feels like an obvious statement. At the time, it was actually contrarian. People said, I don't think that's going to be the case. Boston's going to always be the East Coast hub. LA is going to be the second sort of tech city. At the time, you had companies like Snap and Oculus out in LA. And they said, we're going to build a firm that's focused on this ecosystem and also focused on supporting entrepreneurs differently. And even 5 years ago, that certainly resonated with me. And you can see, if you go upstairs or in the office here, we're over 50 full-time people. So we have 13 investors, and then over 30 people are focused on working with the portfolio. And we have a mantra here where we say startups are hard. And we've built a firm that's focused on supporting people a bit differently. So we invest in a very low volume way. So each partner only does a couple deals a year. I spend all my time doing early stage healthcare investing. But then we have over 30 people who work with the portfolio across recruiting, talent, strategic finance, go to market, all with the thought that if we can help someone figure out any of those things a little bit faster, that's beneficial. I think it was transformative primarily in the way of being like healthcare is so broken, and there are just so many little sort of niche markets in healthcare that people don't know about. They're actually rather large. Contract staffing is a $20 to $30 billion market in the US. Before COVID, when I said I work in contract staffing, people were like, what are you talking about? Then it became travel nursing. It became this whole thing that the headlines were everywhere. So I think I don't invest in labor marketplaces very much at this point because that's very challenging to build and scale those companies. But I think what's resonated the most is like how pen and paper, how manual, how many of these things are just like still in the 1980s. There's a stat, it was like, 80 to 90% of all referrals that, a primary care doc is referring someone to a specialist still come in via fax today. And we used to spend a bunch of time at hospitals, and you'd be like, how do you think about this? How do you run recruiting processes? At the end of the day, it's about finding great doctors and nurses and medical providers. And you'd look at the systems and tools that people are using, and you're like, okay, I guess that's better than pen and paper, but it's not much. And I think one thing that always resonated as well was how you have to meet someone in terms of where they are. Both from a product perspective. I think we actually made a mistake earlier on in Nomad doing the classic startup thing of being like, we're a bunch of smart people, we understand what's right, and we're going to build product based off of that. And didn't do enough of the work really understanding the user, the core user. We would go in and sell to the executive teams, we're going to help you save millions of dollars, that sounds great. But at the end of the day, the person who was using our software was a recruiter and didn't understand their incentive structure well enough, how their day-to-day worked. And we ended up getting there. But I always come back to this idea of being like, okay, whose life are you actually affecting? How do you actually improve that for them? And then realizing that oftentimes in healthcare, they're using very little software. The vast majority of stuff we're looking at today has some sort of AI twist to it. There are certain parts of healthcare where that doesn't make any sense, where you're like, I'm building a care delivery business where maybe AI is going to be important in terms of improving a process or creating some operational efficiency and things like that. But most of the stuff we look at is more on the software side than the pure sort of care delivery side. And we're seeing a lot more interest from health systems and payers around AI. And people piloting things, people understand that this could be very transformative from an industry perspective. Yeah. And I think the bull case is you've had the infrastructure from a data perspective with EHRs and a bunch of these other systems built over the last decade. And when you look at large language models and AI today, that you can actually sort of leapfrog some of the application layer software that never got built here and build AI native products that are making doctors' lives easier. They're streamlining processes for nurses, and then for all the back office administrative side. Most of the stuff we're seeing is in that back office administrative side today. But if you fast forward a decade, how care is delivered and like the clinical experience has to change.
Yeah.
And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about the administrative side and doing that, but then also thinking deeply around what does the future of care delivery actually look like in the United States? A lot of early stage investors, I think, are actually not set up well to invest in big portions of the healthcare market. And that a lot of businesses, particularly in the care delivery space, aren't capitalized properly. And that sort of traditional venture structures might not be the right structure, and or people have to reevaluate how they think about raising capital, primarily with the thought that 18 to 24 months is not actually enough time to go and deliver care and get results and do something that enables you to go raise more capital. So you might need to sell more of the business and raise more capital up front, and that may be from early stage venture investors, or you might have to look at some sort of alternative sources. There's an obsessiveness that you often hear about and you see, and sometimes that comes in the finding product market fit, things like that. We think a lot about rate of learning, actually, because you're building an early stage company with the assumption it's gonna be a windy road. So we constantly try to evaluate when we're getting to know people to how did you get here? Tell me about your story. What were the things that you did wrong to get to this point, and how did you learn that, and how quickly did you learn that? And for founders where they're not fundraising and we're starting to get to know them, what we'd love to see and really gets us excited is those iteration loops and the learning and being okay, great, I had this assumption a couple weeks ago, I went and had a bunch of conversations, I was actually totally wrong about this, but I was right about this, and now we're gonna have a conversation there. And typically when they're people are actually fundraising, you've packaged a story up. But I think the best founders demonstrate that rate of learning and also are confident enough to say I don't know a bunch of these things. It's seed stage investing, pre-seed and seed stage investing. We assume you don't know a lot of things, and being okay with being this is an assumption, this is how I got to this assumption. I might be wrong. But if I'm wrong, this is what I'm gonna do about it. Pre-product market fit with our customers, potential customers. So I think about it you're trying to understand and sort through and find product market fit. And it's so hard to do, but that's the most important thing. So I think about that, and then recruiting and bringing in really exceptional people, because it's so much about the people. Both the founder, but then also the team you build around you to do that.
Please join me in thanking Sam. We really appreciate it. Great insights.
Thanks, everyone.